It all started on what should have been one of the proudest moments of my life, my high school graduation. The auditorium buzzed with excitement, parents clutching bouquets and balloons, the air thick with the scent of cheap perfume and potential. My classmates were practically vibrating with plans for their futures, which colleges they'd attend, which majors they'd pursue, which dorms they'd decorate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should have been one of them. Instead, I sat in my alphabetically assigned seat, the weight of my parents' betrayal pressing down on my shoulders like a physical thing. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been sitting at our kitchen table. Acceptance. Letters spread before me like winning lottery tickets. A state university had offered me a partial scholarship. My dream school, Westridge College, had accepted me to their prestigious computer science program. I was going to be the first person in my family to attend a top-tier university. The path I'd been working toward since I was 12 was finally opening up before me. "So," my dad said, leaning against the kitchen counter, coffee mug in hand, "have you made your decision yet?" I remember smiling, feeling that bubble of pride and possibility expanding in my chest. I think Westridge. The program is incredible, and with my college fund covering most of the tuition, the student loans won't be too bad. The silence that followed was my first warning, a pocket of stillness that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. My mother and father exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. My sister Megan, who'd been texting furiously at the other end of the table, suddenly looked up, her eyes widening slightly. "About that," my father said, setting down his coffee mug with deliberate care. "We need to discuss your college situation." The way he said situation, like my education was a problem to be managed rather than a future to be built, should have been my second warning. "What situation?" I asked, confusion creeping in. "I've been saving since my first job at 15. Between that, the scholarship, and my college fund, I should be covered for at least the first 2 years at Westridge." My mother reached across the table and patted my hand, the gesture feeling both condescending and oddly apologetic. "Honey, there's something we need to tell you about your college fund." And that's when my world collapsed. Not with a dramatic bang, but with the quiet devastation of betrayal. The college fund my grandparents had started for me when I was born, the one my parents had supposedly been contributing to for 18 years. The financial safety net I'd been counting on was gone. Every last penny, gone, I repeated. The word feeling foreign in my mouth. "What do you mean, gone?" "We had to make some difficult decisions," my father said, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he used when he didn't want to be questioned. "Family priorities shifted." "What priorities?" I asked, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. What could possibly be more important than my education? That's when Megan, my older sister by 4 years, had the decency to look slightly ashamed. She twisted the massive diamond engagement ring on her finger, the one that had appeared 6 months earlier when her boyfriend Ryan had proposed. "The wedding," my mother said simply, as if this explained everything. "Megan's wedding was a significant investment. You spent my college fund on Megan's wedding?" The words came out as barely more than a whisper. "Not all of it," my father said quickly, as if this somehow made it better. "But yes, we redirected those funds. The DuPont Club was expensive, and the flowers alone the DuPont Club." I cut him off, my voice rising with each word. "Spent my future on a country club wedding and flowers that died a week later." "It wasn't just the venue," my mother interjected, her voice taking on that defensive edge I knew too well. "There was the catering, the band, the dress." "Lisa," my father warned, shooting her a look. "I can't believe this," I said, pushing back from the table so violently my chair nearly toppled over. "You've been telling me for years that my college was taken care of. I turned down a full ride to State Tech because you said I should go to the best school I could get into." "And you can still go to college," my father said, his tone maddeningly reasonable. "Just maybe not Westridge. State University gave you that scholarship. Or you could start at community college, while Megan got a wedding at the DuPont Club." The injustice of it burned like acid. She didn't even finish her associate's degree. She dropped out to move in with Ryan. Megan's face flushed, Not fair, Jamie. Ryan and I are building a life together.
The wedding.
Was important to both our families. It's more important than my education. I looked around at their faces, my father's stern disapproval, my mother's uncomfortable guilt, Megan's defensive indignation. You knew about this, I accused her. You knew they were spending my college fund on your wedding and you were okay with it. It wasn't like that, Megan protested, but her eyes slid away from mine, unable to maintain contact. How much? I demanded, turning back to my parents. How much of my future did you spend on her one-day party? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My father's jaw tightened. That's enough, Jamie. What's done is done. We'll figure something out for your education. But right now, you need to adjust your attitude. We're still your parents, and this was our decision to make. Our decision, as if my future was just another household budget item they could reallocate at will. As if all my hard work, all my dreams, were subject to their whims and Megan's desires. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. A tectonic plate of trust cracking and sliding away, revealing a molten core of betrayal and determination. You're right about one thing, I said, gathering my acceptance letters with shaking hands. What's done is done. I walked out of that kitchen, a different person than the one who had sat down at the table. The old Jamie, trusting, obedient, always trying to please, died that day. In her place emerged someone harder, someone who understood that in this world no one would fight for my future if I didn't. Now, sitting at my graduation, listening to our principal drone on about futures and potential, I felt that hardness crystallize into resolve. My classmates had spent the past few weeks decorating graduation caps, planning beach trips, shopping for dorm supplies. I'd spent it working double shifts at the local coffee shop and researching financial aid options, student loans, and legal precedents. Because what my family didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that I had no intention of quietly accepting their betrayal. They had made their choice, prioritizing Megan's perfect day over my entire future. I was about to make mine. The truth is, I would never have gone down this path if they'd shown even a shred of genuine remorse. If they'd acknowledged the magnitude of what they'd done. If they'd offered to help me find alternatives. If they'd treated my education with even a fraction of the importance they'd given to Megan's wedding centerpieces, things might have been different. Instead, in the weeks following that kitchen table revelation, they doubled down. My father started leaving college brochures for local community colleges on my bed. My mother suggested I take a gap year to work and save up. Megan Flush, with the success of her DuPont Club extravaganza, had the audacity to offer me a loan from her wedding gifts. Ryan and I got almost $10,000 in cash gifts, she told me, as if this was supposed to make me feel better rather than worse. We could loan you some for your first semester, interest-free. The casual way she offered me a loan of my own money that should have funded my education, was the final straw. What they didn't know was that I had an ace up my sleeve, or rather a grandmother who believed in education more than extravagant weddings. Grandma Eleanor, my father's mother, has been the first woman in our family to attend college back in the 1960s. She'd worked as a librarian for 40 years, living frugally and investing wisely. 2 days after the kitchen table revelation, I went to visit her at her small but immaculate apartment in the senior living community across town. I hadn't planned to tell her about my situation. I was too ashamed. But something about the way she asked about my college plans broke the dam. The whole story came pouring out, including the part about the DuPont Club and the $5,000 flower arrangements. I expected sympathy. What I got was righteous fury. They did what? She demanded, her voice sharp despite her 82 years. With the money from the account Howard and I started for you? My grandfather Howard had died when I was 14, but he and Grandma Eleanor had started my college fund the day I was born. They'd contributed to it regularly, and my parents had supposedly been adding to it as well. I can't believe Robert would do this, she continued, pacing her small living room with surprising vigor. Education was everything to your grandfather. Everything. And then she said the words that would change the course of my life. This isn't right, Jamie, and we're not going to let them get away with it. What followed was a crash course in financial and legal literacy from a woman who had survived the inequities of her era by being smarter and more prepared than anyone expected. Grandma Eleanor didn't just offer sympathy, she offered strategy. First, she helped me request copies of all the documents related to my college fund. We discovered that my grandparents had established a custodial account under the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, with my father as the custodian. The account had been explicitly designated for my education expenses. "This is important," Grandma Eleanor said, pointing to the language in the trust document. "The funds were designated for your education, not for family discretionary spending. Robert had a fiduciary duty to manage these funds for your benefit, not for Megan's wedding." The more we dug, the worse it looked. Over 18 years, my grandparents had contributed nearly $40,000 to the account. My parents had added some as well, bringing the total to just over $60,000. And every penny was gone, withdrawn in a series of large transfers over the 6 months leading up to Megan's wedding. "This is misappropriation," Grandma Eleanor said, her voice trembling with anger. Plain and simple. The next day, she took me to meet with her longtime friend Patricia Winters, a retired attorney who specialized in trust and estate law. Patricia listened to our story, reviewed the documents, and shook her head in disbelief. "I've seen some things in my day," she said, "but parents raiding a college fund for a sibling's wedding? That's a new low." She looked at me over her reading glasses. "You have a case, Jamie? A strong one? The question is, are you prepared for what filing a lawsuit against your parents will mean?" Was I prepared? The question haunted me through the remainder of my senior year. A lawsuit would mean public exposure, family rupture, potential estrangement. It would mean declaring war on the people who had raised me, however imperfectly. Would mean becoming the villain in the family narrative, the ungrateful child who took her parents to court. But what was the alternative? Watching my dreams evaporate while my sister lived her fairy tale at my expense. Settling for less than I'd earned, less than I deserved, because keeping the peace was more important than justice. On graduation day, as I sat in that auditorium, listening to speeches about bright futures and following dreams, I made my decision. I wouldn't just fight for my money, I would fight for every kid whose parents betrayed their trust. For every younger sibling sacrificed on the altar of the golden child's desires. For every dream deferred or denied because someone else's wants were deemed more important. When they called my name, I walked across the stage, accepted my diploma, and smiled for the obligatory photo. My family cheered from the audience, blissfully unaware that the real ceremony, my Declaration of Independence, was yet to come. After graduation, there was the obligatory family gathering at our house. Relatives came bearing cards with $20 bills and platitudes about the future. My mother had ordered a cake decorated with the state university colors, a not-so-subtle reminder of where she expected me to end up. Megan and Ryan arrived late, making a grand entrance and somehow managing to turn the conversation to their honeymoon plans within minutes. I played my part, smiling and thanking everyone, accepting congratulations and advice with equal grace. I was the perfect graduating senior, appreciative, excited, appropriately humble about my achievements. And no one would have guessed that. Beneath my polyester graduation gown beat the heart of a revolutionary. The party was winding down when Uncle Jack, my mother's brother, cornered me by the punch bowl. Uncle Jack had always been different from the rest of the family. A bit of an outsider, a bit of a rebel. He'd made his fortune in tech startups and lived in a sleek downtown loft rather than the suburban homes the rest of the family preferred. "So," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "what's the real plan, Jamie? Because I know you well enough to know you're not taking this lying down." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Uncle Jack must have seen the calculation in my eyes because he laughed softly. "Don't worry, I'm not a spy for your parents." In fact, he glanced around to make sure no one was within earshot. "I've been waiting for someone in this family to finally stand up to the golden child syndrome. Megan's been the center of the universe for too long." Studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity, finding none. "I'm exploring my options," I said carefully. Uncle Jack nodded. "Good. And when you're ready to talk about those options, more specifically, call me." He slipped a business card into my hand. I might be able to help. Before I could ask what kind of help he meant, My mother called everyone to gather for a family photo. The moment passed, but the card burned in my pocket like a talisman. 2 days later, I called the number. Uncle Jack listened as I laid out everything: the misappropriated funds, Grandma Eleanor's research, Patricia Winter's assessment of our case.
Oh, when I finished.
There was a long silence on the other end of the line.
Oh, you understand what you're
About to do, he finally said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I answered anyway. And you're sure this is the path you want to take? Because once you file a lawsuit against your parents, some bridges will be burned beyond repair. I thought about my father's dismissive will, figure something out. My mother's casual suggestion of community college, Megan's offer to loan me my own money. I thought about the years of sacrifice and hard work, the nights spent studying, while Megan partied, the weekends working, while she shopped. Some bridges aren't worth maintaining, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Uncle Jack exhaled slowly. All right then. Patricia Winters is good, but she's retired. You need someone who's still in the game, someone with fire and experience. I know just the person, and I'm willing to help with the legal fees. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. He cut me off. I'm offering. Consider it an investment in your future and in justice. He paused. Yeah, besides, I've been watching. Your parents favor Megan over you for years. It's time someone called them on it. That's how, 3 weeks after my high school graduation, I found myself sitting in the gleaming offices of Hargrove and Associates, across from Alina Hargrove herself, a legal powerhouse known for taking on complex family financial disputes and winning. She was not what I expected. I'd imagined someone older, severe, intimidating. Instead, Alina Hargrove was in her early 40s, with a quick smile and an even quicker mind. She wore a tailored red dress that somehow managed to be both professional and slightly rebellious. And she listened to my story without interruption, only occasionally making notes on a sleek tablet. When I finished, she set down her stylus and looked at me thoughtfully. You know, she said, most people in your situation would just accept what happened and move on. They'd take out loans, go to a cheaper school, adjust their dreams downward. The fact that you're here tells me a lot about you, Jamie. I shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. What does it tell you? Do you understand something most people twice your age don't? Justice isn't a gift. It's a right that sometimes has to be fought for. She tapped her tablet.
Yes.
You have a strong case. The custodial account was clearly designated for your education. Your parents, as custodians, had a fiduciary duty to manage those funds for your benefit, not for your sister's wedding. So you'll take the case? I asked, trying not to sound too eager. Alina smiled, a sharp, determined expression that transformed her face. Oh, I'll take it, and I'll win it. The question is, are you ready for what comes next? Because your parents aren't going to just write you a check and apologize. This is going to get messy. I thought about Westridge College, about the computer science program that was now slipping through my fingers. I thought about Megan and her $5,000 dress, dancing at the DuPont Club while my future burned. I thought about my parents, who had made their choice and now needed to live with the consequences. I'm ready, I said, and for the first time since that day in the kitchen, I felt something like hope. What I wasn't ready for was how quickly everything would escalate. Alina worked fast, filing the lawsuit within days. The formal complaint alleged breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of funds, and conversion, legal terms that essentially boiled down to, my parents had stolen money that was meant for my education and used it for something else entirely. The day the papers were served, my phone exploded with calls and texts. First from my mother, her messages oscillating between tearful pleas and angry accusations. Then my father, his voicemails growing progressively more stern and threatening. Finally Megan, who left a single, scathing message. How could you do this to our family? After everything Mom and Dad have done for you, I didn't respond to any of them. Lena had been clear. No communication except through legal channels. Anything you say can and will be twisted, she warned me. Let me do the talking.
Oh.
Instead, I focused on my immediate future. With Uncle Jack's help, I secured a small apartment near State University. It wasn't Westridge, but with my scholarship and a part-time job, I could afford it while the lawsuit proceeded. I moved out of my parents' house while they were at work, taking only what was undeniably mine and leaving behind a short note, "I'll see you in court." It was both the hardest and easiest thing I'd ever done. Hard because, despite everything, these were the people who had raised me, the only family I'd ever known. Easy because the betrayal had severed something essential between us, something I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. The first legal skirmish came in the form of a motion to dismiss from my parents' attorney, silver-haired man named Walter Pembroke, who specialized in defending the comfortably affluent from the consequences of their actions. His argument was breathtaking in its audacity. The college fund, he claimed, was never legally mine. It was a parental savings vehicle that my parents had the right to use as they saw fit. Alina demolished this argument with surgical precision in her response, citing the specific language of the trust documents, the explicit educational purpose of the account, and a mountain of case law supporting the principle that custodial accounts, created for specific beneficiaries, must be managed in those beneficiaries' interests. The judge denied the motion to dismiss, and the case proceeded to discovery, the phase where both sides request and exchange information and documents. This was when the real psychological warfare began. The discovery process, intended to be a neutral exchange of information, became a battlefield of attrition. My parents' attorney demanded everything, my academic records going back to elementary school, my bank statements, my text messages, my social media history. He even subpoenaed my high school guidance counselor, seeking evidence that I had behavioral issues or was academically unsuited for prestigious universities. The implications were clear. They were going to try to paint me as an ungrateful, underachieving child who didn't deserve college funding anyway. They were going to attack my character rather than defend their actions. It hurt more than I expected. I'd been prepared for anger, for accusations, even for legal maneuvering. But I wasn't prepared for this systematic attempt to diminish me. To rewrite my history into one where I was the problem is a standard, Elena reassured me when I showed up at her office, clutching the latest discovery request with trembling hands. When defendants know they're in the wrong legally, they try to shift the narrative. They want to make this about your worthiness rather than their misconduct. But what if it works? I asked, voicing the fear that had been growing since this all began. What if the judge believes them? Lena leaned forward, her expression fierce. That's why we're going to fight fire with an inferno. If they want to make this about character, we'll show them what character really looks like. Our counter-strategy was elegant in its simplicity. We would let the facts speak. We subpoenaed all records related to Megan's wedding, the contracts, the invoices, the payments. We requested bank statements showing the transfers from my college fund to the wedding vendors. We demanded copies of all communications discussing the decision to use my educational funds for the wedding. And then we waited. The response came not through legal channels, but in the form of an ambush. I was leaving my shift at the coffee shop where I worked when I saw my mother's car parked across the street. She was alone, which was unusual. My parents had been presenting a united front since the lawsuit began. Something about her solitary vigil made me pause. Against my better judgment, against Elena's explicit instructions, I crossed the street. My mother rolled down the window, and I was shocked by her appearance. Just a few weeks, she seemed to have aged years. Her hair, usually perfectly colored and styled, showed gray roots. Deep lines had appeared around her mouth. "Jamie," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and tension. "I've been waiting for almost 2 hours. You shouldn't be here," I replied, glancing around as if Elena might materialize to scold me for this breach of protocol. We're not supposed to talk outside of legal channels. I know. But this has gone too far. She gestured to the passenger seat. "Please, just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. What could it hurt?" I climbed into the car, keeping my back straight, my body angled toward the door, a physical manifestation of my emotional distance. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she said. "Immediately, he'd be furious. Then why are you—" She took a deep breath. "Because this lawsuit is destroying our family. Your father is having chest pains from the stress. Megan and Ryan are talking about moving across the country to get away from the toxic situation. The legal fees. She trailed off, shaking her head. The legal fees are eating up everything, including your retirement fund. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. She flinched. Yes, we've had to cash in one of the retirement accounts to pay Mr. Pembroke. If this continues, I might have to sell the house. I should have felt triumphant. Wasn't this exactly what I wanted? For them to feel the financial pain they had inflicted on me? But instead I felt hollow. This wasn't victory. It was mutually assured destruction. What do you want from me, Mom? Drop the lawsuit, she said, her voice breaking. Please, Jamie, we'll figure something out for your college. Your father and I will take out a second mortgage, or you could live at home and commute to state. Stop. I cut her off. Just stop. You hear yourself? You're still trying to manage the fallout without acknowledging what you did. You still think this is about finding me a budget option for college, not about the fact that you stole my future to give Megan a party. That's not fair, she protested. We didn't steal. You took money that was specifically designated for my education and spent it on flowers and a country club. What would you call it? She was silent, her hands twisting in her lap. The thing I can't understand, I continued, my voice softer now, is why. Why was Megan's wedding more important than my education? Why did she deserve a fantasy day more than I deserved a chance at my dream school? My mother looked out the window, avoiding my gaze. When she finally spoke, her voice was so low I had to strain to hear it. Your father and we've always worried more about Megan. She's not like you, Jamie. She's not as capable. You've always been the strong one, the smart one, the one who would land on your feet no matter what. Megan needed the boost more. The words struck me like physical blows. All these years I'd worked harder, achieved more, asked for less, and this was my reward? My strength had become my punishment. My independence had become my curse. So I get punished for being capable, I said flatly. That's your defense? It's not a punishment, she insisted. It's just family dynamics. Sometimes one child needs more than another, and who decided what I needed? Did you ever ask me? Had you ever consider that maybe I'd worked hard specifically so I could go to a school like Westridge? Maybe I had dreams too. She had no answer for that. I have to go, I said, reaching for the door handle. Jamie, please. She grabbed my arm. Think about what you're doing. Is this really worth destroying your family over? I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in weeks. Behind the stress and the fear, I could still see the mother who had taught me to read, had bandaged my scraped knees, who had sat through countless school performances. But I could also see the woman who had betrayed me, who had valued my sister's wants over my needs, who even now was trying to manipulate me rather than acknowledge the fundamental injustice at the heart of this conflict. You destroyed our family, I said quietly. The moment you decided I was worth less than Megan, I'm just making sure I don't pay the price for your choices. I got out of the car and walked away without looking back. It was only when I reached my apartment that I realized I was crying silent tears streaming down my face for the family I had lost, for the mother I had needed but never really had. The next day, I called Alina and told her about the encounter. Rather than being angry, she was thoughtful. This is actually useful information, she said. It gives us insight into their thinking, and it confirms they're feeling the financial pressure. It also tells us they're divided. Your mother acting without your father's knowledge suggests cracks in their united front. How does that help us? Pressure points, Alina replied. Every case has them. The places where applying the right kind of pressure can break through resistance. Your parents are worried about their retirement, their home, their family image. Those are our leverage points. She paused, her voice softening slightly. But Jamie, I need to ask you something important. What do you really want out of this? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I want my college money back. Yes. But beyond that, do you want to punish them? Do you want reconciliation? Do you want public vindication? The endgame matters because it shapes our strategy going forward. I hadn't thought about it in those terms. What did I want? Revenge had certainly been part of my initial motivation, making them hurt as they had hurt me. But now, seeing the toll this was taking on everyone, including myself, I wasn't so sure. I want justice, I said finally. I want my education funded as it should have been. I want them to acknowledge what they did was wrong, and I hesitated, the last part feeling almost childish to voice. I want them to treat me with the same respect and consideration they've always given Megan. Lena nodded, making notes on her tablet. That's helpful. We're not just fighting for money. We're fighting for recognition and equity. That shapes how we proceed. The next phase of the case brought a new level of intensity. Alina had warned me that things would get worse before they got better, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. My parents' attorney filed a countersuit, alleging that I had exerted undue influence on my grandmother Eleanor to prejudice her against her son and daughter-in-law. They claimed I had manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman into supporting my frivolous and vindictive lawsuit. It was a desperate move, and transparently false. Grandma Eleanor was sharp as a tack and had initiated our legal research. It's not the other way around. But the accusations stung, both for its cruelty and for what it revealed about how my parents saw me. In their narrative, I wasn't just ungrateful. I was calculating and manipulative, willing to exploit an elderly woman for financial gain. I showed Grandma Eleanor the filing. I expected her to be hurt, maybe even scared. Instead, she laughed, a full, rich laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. "Oh, that's rich," she said, wiping her eyes. Vulnerable elderly woman, indeed. I've been managing my own investments for 60 years. I was balancing my checkbook while your father was still learning to tie his shoes. She patted my hand reassuringly. "Don't worry about me, dear. I've been waiting for a good fight. This will keep me young." Her attitude was infectious. If my 82-year-old grandmother could face this battle with humor and determination, how could I do any less? The countersuit backfired spectacularly. Alina arranged for Grandma Eleanor to give a deposition, and she was magnificent. Articulate, precise, and formidable. She laid out in excruciating detail how she and my grandfather had established the college fund, how they had made regular contributions with the explicit understanding that the money was for my education, and how devastated my grandfather would have been to know his son had misappropriated those funds. When asked about her mental acuity, she offered to take a cognitive assessment on the spot and challenged my father's attorney to match her score. The question was hastily withdrawn. But the most damning moment came when she produced a letter. My father had written to her and my grandfather when I was born, a letter thanking them for starting the college fund and promising to honor your investment in Jamie's future. "This letter," she said, her voice steady, as she handed it to the stenographer, "shows that Robert understood exactly what that money was for. 8. He made a promise not just to me and Howard, but to his child. A promise he broke for a crab puff, buffet and ice sculptures." The deposition transcript became our secret weapon. Alina attached it to every filing, quoted it in every response. My grandmother's clear, unwavering testimony stood in stark contrast to my parents' increasingly convoluted justifications. Meanwhile, the financial pressure on my parents continued to mount. Legal fees for a specialist like Walter Pembroke weren't cheap, and my parents were now fighting a war on two fronts, defending against my lawsuit while pursuing their countersuit against Grandma Eleanor. The tension began to show in unexpected ways. My father, who had always prided himself on his community standing, withdrew from his leadership positions in local organizations. My mother stopped posting on social media, where she had once meticulously documented every aspect of our perfect family life. Megan and Ryan postponed their house hunting indefinitely. Through the grapevine, mainly Uncle Jack, who remained my covert ally, I heard that my parents had taken out a home equity line of credit to cover the mounting legal expenses. The retirement account they had initially tapped was nearly depleted. Part of me felt vindicated, and they had gambled with my future. Now they were gambling with their own. But another part of me, a part I wasn't entirely comfortable acknowledging, felt sad. This wasn't what I had wanted, a scorched earth campaign that left everyone financially and emotionally drained. I expressed this to Alina during one of our strategy sessions. "Is there a way to end this without completely destroying them?" I asked. "I want justice. not annihilation. She studied me thoughtfully. There's always the settlement option. We make an offer that gives you what you need while allowing them to save face and stop the financial bleeding. Would they take it? Depends on what we offer and how we present it. Your parents have shown they care deeply about two things: their public image and their financial security. A good settlement would address both. Together we crafted a proposal. My parents would restore my college fund with interest, acknowledging in writing that the original expenditure had been inappropriate. The settlement would include a non-disclosure agreement. It's preventing either side from discussing the case publicly, protecting their reputation. In exchange, I would drop the lawsuit and all claims. What about Grandma Eleanor? I asked. The countersuit against her needs to be dropped too. Absolutely, Elena agreed. That's non-negotiable. The settlement offer was delivered formally through legal channels, but I also decided to reach out directly, not to my parents, but to Megan. Despite everything, she was still my sister. And I hoped that somewhere beneath the golden child facade was a person capable of empathy and understanding. We met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop halfway between her apartment and mine. She arrived looking both defiant and deflated, designer purse clashing with the dark circles under her eyes. You've made your point, she said, before even sitting down. You've wrecked Mom and Dad financially and turned the family upside down. Are you happy now? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that anger wouldn't help. That wasn't my goal, and you know it. I just wanted what was rightfully mine, the money for my education. But did you have to sue them? Couldn't you? Have just talked it out? I tried, I reminded her. They dismissed me. Dad told me to adjust my attitude. He offered to loan me my own money. She had the grace to look slightly ashamed at that last point. I didn't know it was your money specifically. It just said they'd used some savings for the wedding. Some savings? Megan, they spent over $60,000 on my college. Fund on your wedding. Money that our grandparents had been saving for my education since the day I was born. Her eyes widened. 60,000. They told me it was maybe 15 or 20,000, and that it was from their general savings. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Finding none, I pulled out copies of the bank statements, showing the transfers from my college fund to the wedding vendors. Look for yourself, I said, sliding them across the table. 3 transfers of 20,000 each, directly from the UA custodial account with my name on it, to the wedding planner, the DuPont Club, and the caterer. Megan stared at the statements, her face growing pale. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear, Jamie, I had no idea it was this much or that it came from your college fund specifically. For the first time since this all began, I felt a tiny crack in the wall of anger and betrayal. Maybe Megan wasn't complicit, just oblivious, wrapped up in her wedding fantasy and unquestioning of where the money came from. That's why I asked to meet, I said, my voice softer now. Sent a settlement offer. They restore my college fund with interest. We all sign NDAs. Everyone moves on. No more legal fees. No more draining retirement accounts or home equity. Megan bit her lip, considering. And if they don't accept, then we go to trial. Thinks we'll win, and the judgment would likely be for the full amount, plus punitive damages. Their legal fees would continue to mount, and there would be no confidentiality. Everything would become public record. They're scared, she admitted after a moment. Dad's having trouble sleeping. Mom cries all the time. They're talking. About possibly having to sell the house? I don't want that, I said, and meant it. I never wanted to destroy them. I just wanted what was mine, what was promised to me. What Grandma and Grandpa promised you, she corrected softly. Starting to see that distinction now. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of family history and broken trust hanging between us. I'll talk to them, Megan finally said. I can't promise anything, but I'll try to make them see reason. As we stood to leave, she hesitated, then reached out and squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the money, but for never noticing how they treated you differently. I took it for granted. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that whatever else happened, the old family dynamic was gone forever. Couldn't go back to the way things were, but maybe, just maybe, we could build something new. From the ashes, 3 days later, Walter Pembroke contacted Alina. My parents were ready to discuss settlement terms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.